my name is Dee Thompson, and thank you for joining me on Sisters Doing Life Together podcast. On this podcast, I will have candid conversations with amazing and courageous women like yourself who will share how the challenges they have faced have helped them to grow deeper in their faith, become better sister friends, and the lessons they have learned. I hope this podcast will make you feel more connected to a loving and supportive community that we call the sisterhood, grow in your love and faith for Jesus, and experience the power of His transforming love. If you haven't done so already, will you please take a moment to subscribe, rate, and leave a comment on your favorite platform? And when you subscribe, you will be notified of each new episode that comes out on the 1st and the 15th of each month. If you would like to become one of our sisterhood supporters, please take a moment to read the ways in which you can give in the episode description. I hope you will enjoy listening and being a part of this community where vulnerability is encouraged, transparency is celebrated, and freedom is where we want to live. My guest today is Jacqueline Jackie Pitt, and she is a woman who wears many hats. When I say many, listen at this. She's a licensed minister. She's a wife of over 37 years. She's a mother to 4 daughters. She is a mother-in-law. She is a grandmother. She's a school nurse. She's an entrepreneur. She's the founder of a nonprofit organization, and she's also the author of a book. Did I say that she was wearing a lot of hats? Was I not telling the truth? What we're going to talk about today is some things that she put in her book, Mothers and Daughters, their story, their way, only they can tell it. Jacqueline and I are going to talk about the way that mothers and daughters can navigate through the difficult seasons to come to something very beautiful. We talk about healing and forgiveness, and maybe mothers didn't have what we wanted. How the lessons we learned as daughters about what we're not going to do as a result of what our mothers did do. This is what I desire, and I'm sure Jackie as well, is that by listening at our conversation, that you will begin to examine the relationship that you have with your mom. I'm not saying that every relationship can be healed, but if you think about it, if it's at least possible, that you will begin to look at it in a way of how can I bring about healing and restoration? Is there something that I'm holding against my mom? Do I need to forgive? Once again, if possible. Jacqueline said this, and I thought it was important to say it. She did not say it while we were talking, but at the end of our conversation, she said, imagine if God chose not to give us grace. Think about that for a moment. There are often times in life, maybe not with you, but with me, that I've expected people to do what I was not able to do, and that is to be perfect. No, our mothers are not perfect. They're humans just like us. They've made mistakes, and so have we. So as we are fast approaching Mother's Day, this is my desire, that if you can navigate through the difficult seasons and get to the other side, that you would do it. I hope you will enjoy our conversation. Hello, Jackie, and welcome to Sisters Doing Life Together podcast. We are actually starting over because Jackie and I were in the middle of the conversation, just getting started, and internet went crazy. When electronics work, it works well. But when it doesn't, it can be a pain. And so Jackie said something that, I was going to say, Jackie, we'll just do this another day. I was thinking that. And it's like, nope, we're going to try this again and just go from there. I believe that she has something to say about something that is very dear to her. For most women, the relationship they have with their mom, and whether it's a good relationship or a bad relationship, we all want to have, most of us long for a relationship with our mom that goes beyond just the fact that she birthed us, but having a genuine relationship with us. But we know that relationships take work. And so in the introduction, you would have heard me talk about Jackie and the many hats that she wears, and she wears many of them. And so I'm so happy that she's with me today. So thank you, Jackie.
You're so welcome. Glad to be here.
So here we go again, and I'm going to read something that you wrote in your book that I think that is so pivotal to the conversation that we're having. Because we talk about mothers and daughters in their relationship, and oftentimes we think about fathers and daughters and how pivotal that role is, and that we can talk about the father wounds that are left when a father's not there. But I don't know if we talk as openly about the relationships where moms have also inflicted mother wounds, whether it was intentional or unintentional. And I often say whether or not it was intentional or unintentional, it still feels the same.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes. And so I'm going to read this from your book. You said, I have watched many relationships between mothers and daughters over the years, in which some birth hard realities and others joy-filled moments. What I desire for my relationship with our daughters is one that will bolster. And even if we did not agree on everything, we found a way to love through the differences. Unfortunately, I have known mothers and daughters that could not see their way through to the latter. And so that's what I want to talk about because, of course, there are beautiful mother-daughter relationships, but I thought you would be the perfect guest to talk to how to get to, if possible, the disagreements that can lead to what you want for the relationship with you have with your daughter. So just give us a little bit of insight. In reading your book, you talked about as a little girl, the complicated but beautiful relationship that you had with your mom and growing up, what that was like, having mother figures in your life who were there to support you in the woman that you become and what you desire for your daughter. So let's just start with the Jackie at 3, which is, I think you talked about a little in the book.
Yes. At 3, the one memory, as I talk about in the book, is a memory that is not a good memory, and I think I was told about this furthest you can kind of remember. Most people can remember things starting at 3. So, and if you could imagine remembering at 3, driving down the highway with your mom and your dad, you sitting in the back seat at that time, car seats and, wasn't a requirement. So I was sitting in the back seat and I remember my dad hitting and beating on my mom. So that is like the first memory that I have kept with me forever. And I was like, it's so amazing how those things can have an imprint on your life. So now, like being almost 58, that I can remember 55 years ago, that image and that incident so vividly that I can also remember the color of the car. I can remember pulling up at the gas station. I can remember, I can remember the blood. I can remember all that as if it was yesterday. My daughter shared with me about a book, The Body Keeps the Score, I believe it is, and which I have not yet read. But I think it's so important for us to go back and as much as possible heal those places and those wounds that were so early on that we believe that we forgotten and we're over. Yet our bodies and our minds hold on to that.
Absolutely. I actually have that book. I work in a rape crisis and children's advocacy center. So I have the unfortunate but fortunate privilege. The fortunate privilege is that I get to work with children and families as they've gone through trauma. The unfortunate part of that is seeing the children that come into those places where they have actually been exposed to trauma as children at the hands of not always at fathers, but at mothers as well. And so that is one of the books that we've been asked to read because the body does hold onto trauma. And my personal saying is that, trauma doesn't have to have the final say so that love can, and God is love. And so
Absolutely.
He gets to rewrite the story, even though we've had the trauma.
That's right.
And so you had that experience or that memory. And I like the word that you said. It's like the imprint that we can have of watching as a 3-year-old, the violence between your mom and your dad. And from what I read, your mom was really young when she got married. So
she was.
Right. She was young. She was a young teenage mom. Your dad was a teenage father. And so as a child, having that memory. So what was the relationship like with your mom? Because she's a teenager and then she's in a relationship that is violent. So what was it like growing up in the home with her?
I think growing up in a home with her, I believe for me, it was really sculpturing, how I thought a mother should be or how I even saw myself, as a female, even before motherhood, just seeing myself as a female. I know as I watched some of the things that occurred and happened with she and my dad, at some point I decided that that's not going to happen to me. I was like, that would not happen to me. And so it developed a anger, I would say, because growing up when I was younger, I was really angry with the fact that happened to my mom. And also with me putting up this wall to say it won't happen to me because I stayed in the defense. I stayed in the defense where, I would not let anyone talk to me like that, which create that creates that anger. I will not let anyone do me like that, creates that anger. So I think through the process, even though I was kind because she was so loving and kind to other people, I watched her with other people, but I didn't like the way she allowed, and I believe her to allow my dad to be able to do that to her. I did not like it at all. I was so angry about that to the point that I became angry with her.
Gotcha. Okay. So when and you may not have even had words to even identify like why you felt this way about her, you were angry about the situation and angry because in your mind, as a lot of people, when you see someone who's in a domestic violence situation, like, how could you even allow that to happen to you? And I often say, until you walked in their shoes, you don't necessarily know the reasons behind it. And so,
Absolutely.
and so walking through that, how did you manage to get from a place of anger or being angry with her about her allowing that to happen to her as you saw it, to a place of knowing like, maybe it wasn't that she allowed it, but she just didn't know how to do anything different.
Yes. Understanding the process of pain, process of grief, you would go through that process. And honestly, I didn't even recognize it as me grieving because it was really me grieving what I was experiencing and what I was watching. And some people say, well, no, you weren't experiencing. Yes, I was because I was there. If you watch something, you experience it because then the impact is just not on the individual. Can you imagine what she had to endure and go through when she even tried to mother through her pain, through that? And I can only imagine how she felt as a mother to say, my children are watching this and there's nothing I could do, but I started as I became more so when I became in college. That's when a lot of things shift for me. I think through my teenage years, I felt that I probably started to think, have some empathy, and say, you know what, maybe she couldn't do anything about it. But she divorced early on from my dad. I got married young, but she divorced early on from my dad. I can't remember exactly when, but I know I was young, maybe first, second grade, possibly when that occurred. So that was to me a brave step in the right direction. So at least she's taking the opportunities to get away from him, even though she didn't necessarily get away from him, because it was moments that she would experience him and have encounters with him because we lived in the same town. But I think after I became adult, went to college, I had a professor that really helped me started to process this and process this in a manner of saying, you can't control what happened and you're not responsible. And I think that's part of what happened because I took a lot of time growing up. I cared for my mom and my brother,
Right.
even to the point where she had said at one point, which really set a fire in me and made me angry. She said to me, you're my mom. And I was livid when she said that. I was like, I'm not your mom. I can't tell you the words I said, but look, I'm not your mom. You're my mom. So
Right.
that in that point, in that time, really kind of, I think, really took me to a place with her where I was like, no, this cannot happen. This cannot happen. And then my professor is the one that said, you're not responsible. So I realized I was making the situation that she had gone through, everything that I had to take on, I was making myself responsible for her life and my brother's life at that time. And that was a heavy load to bear as a child, as a teenager.
Absolutely. But you said something, Jackie, that I wanted to go back to because, when we talk about moms and daughters and the relationship, talking about mothering through pain, it's like, there are moms and you recognize that a part of the reason that they show up the way that they show up is because they themselves have experienced this pain in their life and they just don't have the tools to know how to mother better or differently. This is what their moms did. And so this is what they're doing. And it's like this cycle. And, I have my mom, when she became a Christian, our relationship was different. But before she was a Christian, I know my mother loved us, but then she didn't always do it well. And so there are some things that were said and done that have left definite imprints. But the love that she had for me is greater than the things that I experienced when she wasn't a woman of faith. So when I think of her, I don't think of her in terms of perfection. I think in terms of her, there was just some things she didn't know how to do. She didn't know what to do. And how do you help women who may be having difficulty with the relationships that they're having with their mother and trying to figure out, like, their mothers have hurt them and some of the pain could have been inflicted, they may feel intentionally. What are some of the suggestions that you can give them to kind of walk through those difficult relationships to get to the other side that they can experience the beauty of those relationships?
One thing I would say is you understand that a person can't give you what they don't have. That's the first thing.
Good.
And when we think about that, even for ourselves, I can't give my daughter something I don't have. No one can. So when you start to realize that they're not operating out of desire to do more, to do better, to love you more. They're operating from a place, unfortunately, of their inability. This is what I have. This is what I want to do, but this is all I have. So when you understand that it's in that space that they're operating, you look at your mom, you look at her and you be like, this is all she has to give. She can't give me any more than that. So unfortunately, what you do is what I have to work with. This is who she is. This is all I have. So therefore, whatever she has to work with, I take and pull. It's like listening to, you're in a meeting, you listen to someone talk, you're in a conference. Everything is not for you in that conference, but there's something in there for you. So when that happens, you pull from that. You pull from your mom's good place because she does have a good place. You pull from her good space because she does have a good space. And you pull from those things and you allow those things to take root and allow you to develop and grow. You do not take the things that are not good. You don't allow them to take root in you. You have to cut them off and separate them off, move to a different place. You have to talk to those people that has wisdom and knowledge to guide you in that place. And that's why it's so important for us to surround ourselves with people that know God, but also have wisdom to move us to that different place. But for as the mother and daughter, you take the good things because trust me, my mom has some good things. And like I said, I would never, ever know how to love like I do and pass that on to our daughters had I not gotten it from my mom, because I saw that in her, that she had a love for other people like no other, even though she didn't receive that love when she initially started out with my dad.
I love that what you said, take the good part. That means to me, it's like you're shifting your focus from their deficit to what they have in abundance or what they can give you. And I think that in relationships, oftentimes we're so focused on the negative and what they didn't do and what I didn't get and how they did treat me like I wanted it to, that it just completely overshadows the good that people have done and the good that they have said. And so, but that's flip side though, when it comes to us, when it comes to our deficits, we will not give people the grace that we want for ourselves. And so when you start talking about, everything that happens to us, if we can look at it from a different lens or a different perspective, we can see it differently. Like, she didn't have it. Your mom doesn't have it. It's not like she's intentionally trying to do harm to you, although we know that there's some parents who do that. But for the most part, if you're looking at your mom and your relationship is not where it needs to be or where you want it to be, maybe just taking a step back and looking at, is it because my mom is intentionally trying to harm me? Or is it because she just doesn't have it?
Exactly. Absolutely. And that's what we have to do because, even the moms, I believe even the moms that actually intentionally harm, is something it's a backstory. And we may not even ever know the backstory. So what happened back there to cause you want to do this to your child or do this to your child at this moment, at this time? So yes, I completely understand that. I completely understand being young and not having the knowledge to even mother or to even parent. And then also the parenting that we receive. You mentioned about how we tend to parent as our parents, you know? So there are things that would not work with my children that my mom used and did with me. And honestly, some of the things I wouldn't even want to use, you know?
Right.
Because-
Absolutely.
Right. Because that's what they knew. That's what my mom knew. And that's the conversation my daughter and I had. And I actually told her, I said, you know what? I realized that some of the things that my mom would do or how the things that she was doing with me, I realized I couldn't use that and do that with my daughters.
That's good.
And so those are the things I dropped because guess what? They were not conducive to my growth. So I knew it would be conducive to their growth.
That's good. So
Mhm.
as a mother of 4 daughters, tell me, how have you navigated being a mom to not 1, 2, 3, 4 daughters? How has that experience been for you? Because you talked about, even though you may not always agree with your daughter, you wanted to be able to basically work through those disagreements. So how has that been for you?
It's been a journey. I mean, you're talking about as women, we know our personalities. Oh my goodness. And no two are the same. That's
Exactly.
that. And that is a tough job in itself because you have to know, okay, when you stand there, when I'm talking to my youngest versus my oldest, my middle, versus the second oldest. And the 4 daughters, Robert and I, my husband and I have 3 daughters together biologically. And then my husband has a daughter. So that's where the 4th daughter came in at. So Belonda, she didn't grow up in the house with us, but she often came to visit. So her experiences or my experience with her was different than the 3 that actually grew up in a household with us, And so, from them, it might been, oh, like typical children. She doesn't want me to do anything. She doesn't want me to go anywhere. She's mean. All those things that, most kids are going to think about their parents and not understand until they become adults. And especially now, our oldest daughter have children. She understands.
Right.
She understands that it's not about being mean. It's about guiding them. But I have found that the journey growing up with my daughters have been such a beautiful journey because I have been able to see myself. That's something for you to be able to look at your children, your daughters, and to see yourself, and not just see yourself in good ways either. You can see those things, you'll be like, boy, was I like that? Did I do that? So it really opened your eyes, I think, to like who you were. Who did my mom experience? You know what I'm
Right.
saying? It opens my eyes to the things that my mom experienced. And you want to say, unfortunately, my mom had passed now, but you want to say, I'm sorry. I mean, I'm sorry because I know I gave you a fit. But, that's one of the things my mom would say.
Mhm.
Talked about how stubborn I was and stuff. But like I said, having the opportunity to have my own daughters, to see that stubbornness, to see that sass, to see that free will, I want to do things the way I want to do them thing. It has been such a beautiful journey for me to really have the opportunity to have daughters and to experience them the way I wanted to or the way I desired to, and to really see how that relationship between my mom and I was different. It was a different relationship, but I'm grateful that God allowed me to work through those things to have that different relationship with our daughter.
I like, you just said something that you said, the working through, like you have to be willing to work through the difficult seasons with your children. But I think the part that they become a mirror, like, so And the mirror doesn't just show, when you look in the mirror, you can say, oh, my hair is so, it's nice.
Right.
And you see that
Right.
little, like, oh, I didn't even see that. It doesn't just
Right.
show the good things, it shows the other things as well. So they give the mirror for you so that you can see even your own imperfections in that how you may have been a challenge for your mom. Because
Yes.
when you're growing up, you think it's always the parent's fault.
Right.
It's never your fault. I remember thinking like about 20s, probably my late 20s, early 30s. I remember thinking, my mom is really wise. And the very fact that she was 26 years older than me means that she probably knew a little bit more. But when I was younger, I thought I knew more than my mom.
Absolutely.
Yes. And so having that understanding. So, being able to see, oh my goodness, maybe I wasn't the perfect child and my mom wasn't the worst mom, is that being able to see that through your own children, through having to raise them. So, having three daughters in the home with you, can you remember a season now that they're adults, whereas it was really difficult, but you had to work through that season where there had to be love and forgiveness and parents even saying they're sorry, because I think that's so important as well, that just because you're parents doesn't mean there's no law that says you never get to apologize, and working through those relationships to get to the other side where you can have these beautiful relationships.
Absolutely. I think there was several seasons because our oldest daughter in the home it's 3 years difference between she and her middle sister. And then the youngest daughter, she's a lot younger because she came 16 years after the middle daughter.
Oh, I
So
didn't know that.
yes, yes. So she came 16 years after the middle daughter. So it was the older two. I think it was probably more so, seeing them in teenage years were rough years. And I don't think the teenage years is as rough with the middle daughter as it was with our oldest daughter. My oldest daughter I had when I was 17, which I mentioned in the book. I had when I was 17. And it was me doing a lot of growing up at that time, when I was raising her as well as she was growing. I was growing up also. And she became a teenager. We were a lot alike. Everybody said that we were so much alike with just the personality, that free will, that stubbornness and so forth. So she and I had a lot of friction and conflict. And my middle daughter often say that as well. But yet at the same time, we were so attached because if something would happen, if one would cry, the other would cry. Like if I start crying, she starts crying. And if she would start crying, I would start crying. So it was like a running joke, like, oh my God, y'all still, the umbilical cord is still attached because as soon as one starts, the other one starts. So we were so connected in that way. At the same time, I think growing up and understanding that she reminded me so much of how tough it was when I was a teenager, if that makes sense. It was a tough time for me as a teenager to be pregnant and to had to go to school. It's my senior year in school. And one of the things when I found I was pregnant, I was so hurt because I thought about how hurt it was, how it was going to hurt my mom, because I knew she didn't want that for me. She never said it, but I knew she did not want me to be a teen mom as she was a teen mom. She had me at 16. I had my daughter at 17. So I knew that was going to be hurtful and that was going to hurt her. So I was very disappointed and embarrassed and all the things that you carry with as a teenager. Grew up in a small town, in the church, and the church, as much as it is loving, and sometimes it's also condemning. And I knew that was going to be hard for her in my thought process. So I think my oldest daughter in the early years reminded me of all the things that, I had to go through, all the emotion, all the pain, all the disappointment that I had to go through. So I think our relationship was initially had a lot of friction at that point. But then, like I said, realizing that it was not her. It was not her responsibility. It was not her fault. was the child that came through that process, and it wasn't her. And I think our relationship shifted more so. I think, like I said, probably more so during the high school years, that we didn't have like, it wasn't like a tumultuous relationship. We weren't battling and fighting back and forth. But I do know that some of that was reminded, some of that hurt was still there in the process of it. And we were so much alike, like I said, in that free will, stubbornness, personality. And our middle daughter, she was so easygoing. She liked to follow the rules. She was a rule follower. So, it was easier for her. And of course, like I said, when our youngest daughter came along, I have matured tremendously. I had come to know God. And so my life was so different in the process. So she experienced a different mom than the older two experienced.
So as we're kind of wrapping things up, I know that you were talking about the difficulty that you may have had with your eldest daughter because she reminded you of, your teenage years and how difficult it was as a teenager, but your middle daughter, not so much. And then there was a difference because there's a younger daughter who's 16 years younger than I think the middle child or the
Yes, the middle.
right. And so there would have been a different experience with each of them individually. So for moms and daughters who are working through a difficult season, because Mother's Day is just around the corner. And for some of us who no longer have their moms, like you and I was telling you before we started, like this particular Mother's Day seems to be pretty emotional for me. And it's not always that way. And sometimes we can just get so focused on the number of years that your mom hasn't been here. And people can say really insensitive things like, are you still crying about that? Or things that they shouldn't be saying. I'm just missing my mom.
Yes, absolutely.
How would you suggest the mom and daughter who are navigating through a difficult season, how can they mend that relationship?
Donna, I really would say it's not a one-step process. It's not a one size fits all, because there are different things that occur and happen in different relationships. There are some things that you're going to have to or will be willing to easily to forget and forget. There are other things that occur in a relationship that you just can't because it seems so damaging to you. And with those, it requires a more in-depth, it requires a more in-depth counseling and therapy that you have to go through. So I wouldn't be able to say there is one magic fit for, relationships, because all relationships are different. There are circumstances and situations that occurred in some relationships that can be so hard to really get through without some deep, intense therapy. But for those that have the relationship because it's something someone said, sometimes it's even relationship destroyed by something someone said that they didn't even realize sometimes that they said that it hurt like that. I think we have to realize, especially at Mother's Day, and as you said, you and I, our moms are not here, and there's no greater disappointment and sadness than when you realize your mom is no longer here and you cannot go to her to say and have a conversation, a simple conversation. So I would say to those that still do have their mom here, don't waste what happened yesterday. Don't waste today on what happened yesterday, because you can always start from today and understand that through the process of being wounded, and I talk about wounded healer, and hope I get a moment I can read that because I think that's so good. I talk about being a wounded healer and realize from the place that you are, yes, you are wounded, but you have the ability to not just allow and give permission to yourself to heal, but you have the ability through the wounds to reach out and heal others, which of course is the relationship you have first and foremost with your mother. She's still here with your daughter. And I'm not just saying a mother has a responsibility or daughter has a responsibility to heal the relationship. I think we both do. Mother and daughter has that responsibility of reaching and healing that relationship. Maybe it's just picking up the phone and saying, I was calling to see how you're doing today. And it's nothing more than that. And that could start the opening to a relationship beginning to heal. So you might can't say I love you just yet. You might can't go back there just yet, but you can pick up the phone and you can say, how are you today? I was thinking of you. And let that one seed water and grow and spread into reconnecting that relationship. Because the relationship between a mother and daughter can actually impact the relationship you have with so many others in your life. So it's important for us to do that, to be willing to say, let me see how you're doing today. A simple phone call, a simple text. If you can't call, now we have the ability to text. And because do that, just a simple, how are you today? I was thinking of you.
That's
And
good.
that, yes.
So as we're ending this section of our conversation, you talked about the wounded healer. I think it would be a good opportunity for you to read that for those that are listening, because you said that we all have an opportunity to not only, we've all experienced pain. We just want to put that out. Blanket statement for everybody who's alive, that we've all experienced some type of pain. But what we do with that pain is important. And so can you read that as we end the podcast episode?
Absolutely. I would love to. In the book, I talk about wounded healer because I think that's such a big part of our lives, not just as mothers, as daughters, but as people. It says, I know we all have a story, yet those that are willing to tell it will be the ones that transform lives. There's a theory called wounded healer, first introduced by Carl Jung and later developed by Marianne Canty O'Hare. As the nurse or as a wounded healer that addresses the effective or ineffective coping strategies after exposure to or experiencing personal trauma. It explains that if trauma is dealt with effectively, the pain is consciously recognized, transformed, and transcended into healing. This process ultimately leads to healing despite the remaining scars. I believe we all are wounded healers in the respect of turning our pain into healing for ourselves and others. As you read through these stories of the brave women who chose to tell a part of their life's journey, may you find the courage to live and the strength to rise above your circumstances, that so that you may also become a wounded healer. I love that concept. I love that concept. And it's such a beautiful concept. And it's such a true concept of us all. Because even through the scars, we have the ability to heal ourselves and others.
That is so good and so true. And so for those of you who have had an opportunity to listen to this conversation, and I do apologize that we were having so many interruptions, but I still believe it's a conversation even with that, and we'll take care of most of them many of them as possible, that this is a conversation worth having. Is actually a conversation that hopefully will initiate conversations between mothers and daughters if they have relationships that have been fractured or broken. Like what you said, Jackie, about some of those relationships may even require therapy. So do your best to restore the relationship. And if it can't be restored, it's not because you didn't put in the effort. I will actually put Jackie's information in the episode description about how to purchase her book, which is called Mothers and Daughters, Their Story, Their Way, Only They Can Tell It. I'll post her information for her Instagram, her Facebook page as well. I think that if you are a woman who has a mom who's alive, that this conversation is worth considering, the fact that we're coming up on Mother's Day, that if there is something that you can do for yourself and for your daughters, or for the women who don't have children, who are like mother figures, to mend, to heal, not only get the healing you need for yourself, but to help someone else to come into their place of healing, that it is truly worth it. So thank you again for listening to Sisters Doing Life Together podcast. Thank you, Jackie, for being my special guest today. I so appreciate it.
Well, I'm so grateful, Donna. And as we close, if you don't mind, I would love to invite the mothers and daughters, or mothers, daughters, nieces, grandmas, whomever, You don't have to come with a mother or a daughter. You can come by yourself. Please join us May the 11th. We're having a mothers and daughters brunch, and it's going to be phenomenal. This is our third year. Each year has sold out, and we have done such a wonderful job of connecting with each other and those guests that are there. So join us, and we're going to have some good food too.
Sounds good. I will be there, and I've sent the information out to my ladies here, and I will post that in the episode description as well. Thank you again for tuning in. All right, until next time. Thank you again for taking the time to listen. Please take a moment to read some of the takeaways from today's episode, along with ways to subscribe, rate, connect, and support the podcast in the episode description. If we aren't connected yet, please follow me on Instagram at sisters_doing life together. And remember this, you were created for community. And when you belong to a sisterhood, you don't have to do life by yourself. Until next time.